TellyCast.
Hi, I'm Justin Crosby and welcome to another TellyCast. Many UK independent TV production companies have gone bust or in serious trouble since the commissioning downturn hit last year as a result of financial uncertainty, falling revenue figures and the drop in advertising revenue for commercial broadcasters. The term survive until 25 has become a watchword for businesses as they struggle to keep going as the content industry undergoes a fundamental shift that will likely lead to lower levels of production in the coming years. But will things be better in 2025? What are indies doing to stay at the table? And what are broadcasters and other industry organisations doing to help, if anything? This week's show marks the return of The Secret Producer, a special show where I speak to some of the UK's leading indies under the cloak of anonymity. We've changed their names and voices to protect the identities as they speak frankly from the front lines of TV production to tell their stories of frustration and business survival. They're all true indies and not part of wider production groups. My first guest is Jim, who runs a southern-based indie. Hi, Jim. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you.
Nice to have you on the show. Thank you very much for coming on and sharing maybe a few war stories or a few frustrations or really what I'm keen to get is a bit of a sense of what it's like from the front lines. How's business right now?
It's a tough time, isn't it? And I think when you look at what's happening across the industry, we're in a state of flux. We're in a position where people can't really second guess what's happening, what's going to happen in the future. That sort of adds, I suppose, a layer of stress and anxiety to business that we've not had for quite some time. I mean, in terms of our business, we're having a pretty good year. But a lot of that work, it's probably come from last year's sort of seed planting. And, one of the things I have found tough this year is trying to get new projects away seems almost nigh on impossible. It's complicated, isn't it? We'll get into it more, but it seems to me every channel needs you to come with money now, or some sort of form of co-production, or, there's very, very few actual real commissions on the plate there. And there's a lot of people scrapping around trying to get them. But then I also see there's a big shift into, the world of digital. People starting to make their own content, people finding new ways of getting through, but it's tough. It's tough because, you've got to be really careful on head count and overheads. In terms of, keeping your business afloat. But then that often means, in our business, it means the seniors are having to do a lot more of the doing. And then there's a pullback on selling them. So in order to keep, as I said, planting those seeds in the hope that, some will grow, it's hard to keep on top of it. I just think there's just a relentlessness to the world in our industry at the moment, which is, It's tiring. Everyone says that everyone feels like they're on a hamster wheel.
Yeah. Are you feeling like, as an agency, as a production boss, you're taking a few steps back in terms of having to do lots of different jobs that, once upon a time you had team members to do? Are you finding that you're having to be right back at the coalface again?
Yeah, definitely. When towards the end of last year, when the industries really started to tank, one of our in-house exec producers, purely for another reason, decided to leave the industry. And what we didn't do was replace them. And that was a conscious decision to just make sure that we could reserve cash, to make sure that we had enough cash around to keep ourselves surviving through this year, survive to 25, as you said in your intro. But what that has meant is that, we've got 3 TV series in production at different stages at the moment, and I'm having to go back and properly exec all of that, as well as my day job, which is trying to develop new ideas and sell them.
Yeah. Well, just going back to a point that you made earlier, how long have you found there's been this commissioning stasis, if you like? When did that start, as far as you're concerned?
I think it was probably about July. It was probably July, August last year, wasn't it? I think it was. That's when it felt to me that things started to. Right. I think the first time people were alerted to it was Channel 4. Where Channel 4 were putting the brakes on. They weren't going to be commissioning until I can't remember when it was, September, October, November.
Well, they came out at Edinburgh, didn't they? Ian Katz came out at Edinburgh and talked about, actually he was more talking about Channel 4 was being more honest as opposed to other broadcasters who were perhaps being less honest about, their commissioning challenges and how much they're going to be commissioning and when they're going to be commissioning again. So, I mean, have you seen? Because that's almost a year ago now. So you're seeing no change in terms of the commissions that you've had from Channel 4.
Well, interestingly, the industry got very annoyed at Channel 4 across that period because they felt like they were cutting off, revenue for the indie sector, a big proportional revenue for the indie sector. But actually what's followed suit now is Channel 4 don't look any different to any others. All the other channels now are cutting jobs, making redundancies. Budgets are being slashed or being repositioned in different ways. Every commissioner I talk to says, well, if you can come with some money, then it's going to be very, very helpful.
Right. Okay. So you actually need money already. You need some sort of money, whether that's from a brand or another international broadcaster. You need to go in there with money to stand any chance at the moment of getting something over the line.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think more and more now we're going to see it's going to become the future really of working with distribution partners, content funds, co-pros. It's become slightly harder. Is it harder, or might it be easier if you can get money from the get-go? Money talks.
But if you're going to distributors though, and having to get a distribution advance, essentially, get a distribution investment from the get-go, doesn't that then mean that all the content that's going to be commissioned is going to be something that will have to travel internationally to even get a chance of being made? And therefore, we're not going to be seeing shows that are quintessentially British, if you like.
I've literally just come off a call with an agent who has essentially said that, even the big streamers now here in Britain want American stories, British producers to make American stories. That term content soup, it does worry me because it feels like everything now that is wanting to be commissioned has to be very big budget, 800, 000, a million. They might have some tax credit involved. So then that's going to be a hero show for a broadcaster or streamer to really market. To stand out in a crowd and be a really big noisy show so that it draws a crowd to them, and then their job then is to retain that audience. But in order for that to work, it does have to have a global appeal, because if you're spending that level of money, it's got to have a very good return on it. So you'd want that format or that tape to be able to sell internationally. But then on the flip side, in the sort of the more low cost TV side of things, again, yeah, it's got to sell. If you're producing something with a distributor and going with money at the beginning, then it's a very different thing to a regular commission. It's being invested in to make money in the future. It's got to travel. And then again, the ideas have to be big and global and relatable in a universal and inverted commas. How many times you hear that it's going to be universal way, and it was just going to end up with the same content, are we?
Well, it sounds like it. I mean, it's it feels like there's going to be very different content being produced in the future. I mean, interesting. We've seen Channel 4. We're talking about Channel 4. We've seen The Rest is Politics as a podcast become a TV show, and we've seen The Traitors podcast become a TV show, or their spin-off show. Do we think that that's really going to be the new low-budget TV, essentially podcast shows that are being shot with 3 cameras in regular studios for super low budgets? That's presumably that's where we're going, is it?
Well, ITV now talk about their 9 p.m. slot being the streamer hour, the streamer slot. So if they launch a show like Fortune Hotel, and that's going to be stripped across the week, that 9 p.m. slot they're spending a lot of money, like I said, probably in the region of 800 to $1 million per episode. That's got to really work for them as a sort of a marketing tool, because linear TV and scheduling and appointments view has dropped off the face of the earth. And so what is going to fill the rest of that channel airtime? Obviously cheaper acquisitions, lots of repeats and reruns, but podcasting, I suppose, is becoming something it's a very popular medium. You only have to look at the fact that Diary of a CEO has launched its own fast TV channel with Samsung. It's a chat show. You see that Piers Morgan interviewed Kevin Spacey last week. Stephen Bartlett interviewed Simon Cowell. We had the Sidemen doing their big new reality show called Inside. The sort of the pendulums shifted. It swung into a different space.
Yeah, those are the three of the biggest, most talked about TV shows of the last 2-3 weeks, and none of them were on mostly TV.
So that's the thing. So like if you've got something that's got that level of popularity, the rest is politics, for example, why wouldn't you put it on TV? In fact, I saw somebody post about this and about, what are we coming to? But to be fair, when you look at the rest of this politics, is it very much different to the Panorama interview with Rishi Sunak? I mean, it's just a very simple studio with some lights splashed on a wall. The only thing that's different is you've got two podcast monies sat in there rather than lapel mics. And I do think that actually, podcasts are compelling, and you are seeing now that they say statistically more people watched our Overseer than listened to it as audio. If you're able to produce low cost but high quality chat show, then I don't see I think for me, I think channels and producers, they should lean into the fact that it's a podcast. You should highlight that and make it feel like it's an event in the way that we might feature something else on television. I mean, it's only the traditionalists, isn't it, that are going to get upset about this.
Yeah. Well, it's reality. Like you say, it sounds like there's going to be fewer bigger bets, and the big bets are going to be big, and there's lots more airtime to fill. So this seems like, trying to create a new form of premium content that's low cost sounds like that it would make sense. I mean,
if you saw in a streamer, a category which said podcasts, and you went on it, and there was loads of different podcasts on there, and they were all studio-based shows, you wouldn't think twice about clicking on them and viewing them through that. But because it gets put on your channel as an appointment to view thing, what is the difference? There is no difference. You've just entered that world through a different bloody button on your remote control. People get very tied up and weird about these things, but the truth is, at the end of the day, television and content is going to become app-based and not live as we've always known it. And in that respect, we've got to think about the fact that what is the most popular content? Where can I find it? And, and is it, for me, I think we have to sort of move on and embrace the future.
Yeah. You talked about some big names then, and it brought to mind the issue of talent and agents. So there's less shows being commissioned. What are agents doing, as far as you can see, to plug the gap? Because their talent are not working or not working as much. How's it affecting your conversations with agents?
I do see there is a real nervousness in the agency world in terms of, talent agents. You can see that there's the money's really dropped off because there's a lot fewer shows being made. I think a lot. Every talent agent now is that their job is they've got to keep their client happy, but they've also got to make money for themselves as well as the client. So how do you do both? You've got to try and be, future thinking, future proofing. So all talent agents want their talent to get a podcast in the future. I hope that one will blow up and they can have a hit show. I think live is a really important thing. You see if a talent can tour, you're seeing a lot more of that these days. Whether it's a case of them writing a book and doing a book tour, whether it's a comedian. I mean, if you're a comedy agent, then actually you'd be in an okay spot, because live comedy, they've been on that trip for quite some time, because comedy is something that started to disappear from commissioning way before this, the latest world that we find ourselves in. And actually, so if you're a stand-up that can fill anything from 500 seaters upwards to 1,500, 2,000, or even stadiums, then you are very lucky, because you will always make a good living. But the talent that are in the sort of factual space, consumer space news, they're all very worried. I spoke to an agent last week who represents a lot of people in the factual space, and there just isn't any programming for them to be a part of anymore, where before they would have had all of that 8 p.m. slot type content on the plenty of shows for them to be a part of, whether it's a makeover show, a transformation show, whether it's a health show, or or whatever. All that kind of 8 p.m. factual entertainment has disappeared, because they need the money from that to pay for their robbing Peter to pay Paul up at 9 p.m.
So talking about broadcasters then, I mean, are they doing anything to help? Because, they've relied, okay, it's a two-way street. A lot of indies have become very successful over the years and had great relationships with Channel 4, ITV, and the other commercial broadcasters. And we are talking mainly about commercial broadcasters here as opposed to the BBC. But, should broadcasters be doing anything to help? What's it like pitching to Channel 4 or ITV at the moment? Are you if they're not commissioning, are you pitching?
We are still pitching and we're having meetings, but a lot of the conversation, you've got to for those channels. It's like I said, you've either got to turn up with some money and an idea that they want, or they've got very, very few slots. And then you just know that you're in a massive competition then with everybody else, every other man and his dog, trying to win that slot. So for me, putting energy into that doesn't feel like the right thing to do, because there's probably easier wins and easier routes through finding money first and whatever. But
yeah, just on that point, being a true indie, do you see yourself being at a disadvantage if you're pitching for the same slot against an indie that's part of the bigger production groups?
Yeah, that 100%. Like right now, there's always not Channel 4, but the more commercial broadcasters, ITV studios, it would make sense for them to commission internally. And I think there's probably more co-pros having to happen because of it, because they need the money to flow internally. You asked about whether broadcasters are doing it to help the indie sector. I don't know, but what can they do? What can they do apart from, there's probably the odd event here and there which talks about how to survive or mental health or, all the things that sort of the outward facing things that you've probably got to do as a broadcaster to look like you're being responsible. But, at the end of the day, we just all want work. It's not, it's that it's black and white, isn't it? What we want is for them to spend money on content with us. And if they can't do that, then there's not much anyone can do.
I always wonder what a commissioner does when they're not commissioning. There seems to be lots of them, and there's not much commissioning to do. So I just wonder what they do with their time during the day.
I think, do you know what? One thing I have noticed this year is that the power is shifting. With broadcasters and buyers, you have those commissioners that you have very good relationships with, that you can spend time with, you get to know, will let you in, and you develop something that hopefully between the two of you allows you to work towards making something that you both care about. And then you have commissioners, and there are a lot of them that don't have the experience of someone that's running a production company or even an exec. Because they may have come from being in development or being a producer. They don't really understand what it's like to be on the cold face of, the life and death of business. And there is a lack of respect where it's easy for them to just push you down the line for 3 months and get you to go off and do something because it keeps you busy whilst they go and make something with an indie that they want to work with because they like a show that they make. That's frustrating, because I do feel like that is a big frustration across the industry. There are a lot of producers and a lot of people that I know that run their own indies who just get so fed up with being dicked about, and it's just not fair. And I think that is the side that is changing now, in the fact that they haven't got that power to be able to do that anymore, because they don't have, what are they sitting behind?
Yeah.
They're not sitting behind lots of success, are they? They're sitting there. They're all worried. They're probably worried about their jobs. They're worried about what you think of them. They're worried about how they're the cold face of their business. It can't be easy for them as well.
No, that's true. And just finally, freelancers are a key part of the industry that we keep seeing polls or bits of research that 75% or 70% of the freelancers in the UK are currently unemployed and probably have been since the beginning of the year. How is it affecting you when it comes to, you said that you're still having some success with commissions and some work, although you're having to exec it and be very much hands-on across the projects that you're working on. But when it comes to hiring freelancers, are there still freelancers there available? Are there too many available? Are they contacting you all the time for work? What's the impact on the freelance workforce from your perspective?
I get way more CVs now than I've ever got in my life, like handfuls daily, or LinkedIn, people linking in with me. I feel really sorry for, I feel really, really sorry for those that, because I don't think you go into this industry to just make money. You go into it because you love it. It's a job that we all really, really enjoy and get excited about and are passionate about. And to not be able to do the thing that you absolutely love doing, it's heartbreaking. So my heart really goes out to anyone that's not working. Yeah, there's a lot more choice now. Like for us, I'd rather people be in work. But it is when you have to scale up, or, at the moment, we've probably got something like 10 editors working across numerous things at the moment. And every now and then something else will drop in and we'll be searching for another editor. And then the problem is that, you want to make sure they're good and that you've worked with them before, or they're trusted, and if it's a quick turnaround thing. And because there are so many freelancers out there that aren't working, that's difficult to spot who's good, right? People who are good get a reputation and work lots, and actually really the good ones will be working. But yeah, I feel really sorry for them. It's so many people I know of leaving the industry and doing different things or working other jobs as well whilst they're waiting. It must be horrible. It must be really horrible. And I certainly know running a business what it's like to feel huge stress about when things are working, when they're not. And it's not nice. And, I'm touching wood when I say that we're having an all right year, because it's not over yet. And we still, like I said at the beginning of this chat, I still can't see the woods through the trees yet. I don't quite know what we do know is that linear is essentially over and streaming is the new thing, but definitely the focus for everybody, and then how they sort out the way budgets work and how much programming and where the money is going to come from and how they're going to commission and how there is yet to be seen. So that's kind of, it's a very new world.
Yeah. Jim, well, listen, thank you so much for joining me this week. It's been really fascinating to hear about the challenges that you're going through, and it's really great to get an insight. I'm really pleased that you're managing to weather the storm. Fingers crossed for you that you continue to do that. And thanks again for your time.
Thanks, man. And this secret is just between me and you.
Oh, yeah, just between me and you. Thanks, Jim. So my next guest on this week's Secret Producer Show is Kate, who's got a TV, independent TV production company. Again, another UK indie. Kate, how are you doing?
Very good, thank you. All good.
Excellent. Thank you for joining me, and really great that you could spare a little bit of time. How are you finding it? How are you finding it out there in indie TV world? I mean, it must be tough, right?
I think the toughest thing is how quiet it is. I think my phone used to be this hotbed of communication whereby if I wasn't texting, I was phoning, or I was emailing someone, or they were WhatsApping me and I was rushing from meeting to meeting. And it's just the kind of like the silence is a killer. And I think it feels like if I don't proactively make things happen, not a lot's happening. And I suppose that's always been the case. But right now it feels much more acutely so.
Yeah. So what in terms of pitching, I mean, are you still pitching in the same way that you always have been, or is the downturn in commissioning changing the way that you're currently pitching to broadcasters?
Well, we're a really polymathic production company. So we pitched all different sorts of commissioners across all different sorts of channels. And I think, therefore, we've got quite a big picture view on it all. I mean, to be honest, the answer to that question is it's changed a lot with some of them. And then with others, it's changed less because it depends on where they're sitting in the market. So certain channels feel pretty stable. And like, the UK TVs, they've got a very smart business model. It really works. Their channels have demands which haven't changed that dramatically in the last year or so. And then there are other channels like, the BBC also, their demands haven't changed dramatically, whereas other more commercial organizations have definitely changed their shtick. And we are having to adapt and go through different means to kind of like approach them in maybe a different way with thoughts of co-production and thoughts of different ways of making programming, sometimes thinking more low cost or sometimes more high impact. I mean, I don't know if I can go on to say, but this whole talk of the missed middle, the middle that's gone, so to speak, I don't quite buy it. I think that everyone's watching all different sorts of television, and viewers don't see things in high budget or low budget. They just see good telly or not good telly, and they're very forgiving of low budget. And nowhere more do you see this than on TikTok. I have the misfortune of watching quite a lot of YouTube with my 16-year-old son, and I can see exactly what they're watching, and what they're watching is all different sorts of quality, sometimes very low quality, and they wouldn't see it as middle or anything. They just think that's what they want to watch, and that's getting often millions of views.
Well, I'm assuming, I'm going to make the assumption that you're perhaps talking more about ITV and in particular Channel 4 there, when you're talking about the change in the demand of the type of content that they're looking for. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, there's barely any point in talking to ITV. They lost their factual base a very long time ago. And although they've got a few great shows, in the kind of long lost Family World or Love of Dogs, which they used to have, obviously, and they're reinventing, and they've got some really great kind of quiz shows in the kind of 1% club. They haven't got a kind of structure set up to take on a lot for factual. And when the downturn is as it is, it's got to be one of the first of all.
Right. Okay. So you as a predominantly factual producer, you're just not bothering with ITV anymore. And how are you approaching Channel 4? What's the news there?
It's funny, the relationship with Channel 4, because it's in a funny time as a channel. I mean, the news there, and I'd only say this anonymously, is it feels like they haven't got enough commissioning hits to really pin a great schedule on terrestrial around, and they're concentrating very heavily on streaming, which for them has been quite a big growth area, which is great. But I think going back to the viewer, I think we shouldn't avoid anything at our peril. We should look both at terrestrial and streaming as the future, and not be so frightened by the means in which it's consumed the programme. I think the commissioning is not been up to scratch at Channel 4. It's difficult because they don't have the budgets either to really commission widely at the moment. So they're taking either very big bets or very low cost bets.
Yeah. Well, we've seen a lot of the networks cutting staff by about 20%. It seems to be the sort of general figure that ITV and Channel 4 and other networks as well. I mean, in terms of how that affects a factual producer like you, I mean, are you also having to cut your overheads at the moment to make sure you're still fit for 2025, which is what we're talking about, trying to survive until 25?
Well, I think survive until 25 is a fantasy of yours, Justin. I think it's going well into 26. Without sounding too Pollyanna, I'm very hopeful about the future. I just think that the next year or two is going to be very complex because we're looking at, a refinancing of an entire industry because there's a plethora of reasons why we've got here. But we are where we are, and until mass consolidation occurs and the funding model changes, I think we're going to be in real trouble. And I don't think that's going to happen very, very fast. But equally, when we're watching over 5 hours of television, long form a day as individuals in the UK, I think we've got to have confidence that those numbers are rising. That's very positive. And we've got to have faith that the viewer will come to us when we find ways of making that content get to them, which makes financial sense for our company and how we're cutting costs or not cutting costs. I mean, that's not a good production company in the country that isn't constantly looking at cutting costs and how to do things better and cheaper. If anything, I think we're seeing this as an opportunity to diversify what we are doing with our content production. There's never been more of a demand for it. I mean, it's just, we're seeing it perhaps, and not just the way we used to. So we're diversifying into podcasts. We're diversifying into different markets, which might be interesting to us. We're open to more commercial arrangements, which we hadn't been before. I think we're just trying to think of all different ways. I don't know what the future holds, but I refuse to be scared of it in a time when I see that the consumption of great television or content, couldn't be greater and is increasing.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting what you say there. You're talking about the refinancing of a whole industry, and that's exactly what it is, isn't it? I mean, it's at the moment, nobody knows where the money is, and nobody knows where the money is quite going to come from. And we know that about all the money that's moved onto social media when it comes to advertising, and that's not coming back. But there is still this demand for content, and surely it's more and more commercial brands maybe starting to fund content. I mean, is that something that you're looking at, brand funded content as well?
Yeah, I think, brand funded content has always been such a bloody nightmare, and and truthfully, most in this have tried it a bit, done a bit of it, hasn't really worked very well. I think it will become much stronger, and there's much more closer relationships being formed between brands and directly within this, sort of cutting out all the various middle people who take cuts in it. And I think that is a new future that we're looking at, definitely as one of the futures. But I think it's simplistic, and without being too negative to you, Justin, but generally to the industry, not just you. It's a bit male orientated. There's one solution. This is how it's going to be. I really think the answer is to have an eclectic range of answers and try a range of different things, because I don't know where the big money is going to come from. I can't work out whether Apple will buy Netflix or whether, ITV will buy Channel 5. A million things could happen, and I think any of them are possible. And that speculation is interesting, and I'm really happy to have that conversation with you, but I don't know. But what I do know is that if we try lots of different things and try different ways of approaching content, so you talk about kind of YouTube or whatever, the advertising in that world is never going to come back. That's okay. Well, maybe I'll go to YouTube. Maybe some of the stuff I'll do will be Predator-style filming with one person on a mission to it. As I just saw the other day go across America on Ascent, which is obviously a terribly old program idea that most development teams in the country have developed at some point, but it's getting, tens of millions of views as some young influencer is traveling across America, trying to do it on the smallest amount of money. But those kind of ideas are still available to us. We're not excluded from the YouTube world. We are content producers, so we can think wide about how to do it. And that might well inform us doing other more premium content for terrestrial and or streaming channels.
Yeah, this is something that we've talked about on previous episodes of TellyCast. Is the octopus model. People are probably fed up of me mentioning this, but the idea that you have an IP in the center of a wheel, if you like, and basically you have lots of different ways of monetizing it, from podcast, maybe a longer form content on YouTube, then hopefully making a unscripted show, and maybe it has a potential for a scripted show at the end of this sort of cycle. But lots of different ways to monetize the same central IP. Is that really where are you seeing yourself moving to become more of an IP based business?
Definitely yes and no. So sorry to be difficult. There's nothing better than what Fremantle coined many years ago, and people were horrified by the wheel of value, which you call octopus. But it's the same thing. It's like there's a brand in the middle, and how do you make money out of it? Obviously, you've always got to think about, how am I going to make money out of this to make this sustainable as a business idea? It might be speculatively like, well, maybe there isn't a whole wheel of ways of which we can make money around this particular idea. Maybe there isn't a drama at the end of it, and there isn't a cut I can get produced cheaply in China or whatever it is to make that brand grow stronger. But maybe there's one thought that might actually outstrip all the others. I've certainly been involved in formats historically that have made huge amounts of money on tape sales, and just tape sales and nothing else. And then I've been involved in formats where it's the format idea that's gone really, really big and nothing else. I haven't yet had the joy of having massive commercial hits on having cups sold with the name of that program on it, but that's something to look forward to. I think, yes, there should be a sort of like thinking about IP at the center of things and how you can do that, capitalize on it expansively. But I think you must, at your peril, you avoid going instinctively into what you feel is right for people to watch. I think it can't be too cynical. So it can't start with I know I've got a great idea. Everyone eats sausages. Let's try and commercialize that and try and think of different ways we can make a program called The Sausage Show. And by the way, that's a shit idea. But I think thinking wide, if you like it, you're going to commission me, Justin, because that's good.
Well, I suppose I've got about the same chance of, or the same content budget as a Channel 4 might have to commission that idea right now.
Okay, that feels unlikely then. Yes. Look, listen, Channel 4's had a lot of bashing, and for good reasons, but sometimes we're missing the reason. It was a bit of a canary in the mine when it came to, telling the bad news early on. And a lot of other channels kept very quiet and did exactly the same as what Channel 4 did. So let's not kid ourselves. They're the only people who've got a commissioning slowdown. There's a commissioning slowdown, not entirely across the piece, but a long way across the piece. And what there's definitely across the entire piece is an opportunity for a lot of broadcasters who potentially have money to say, hey, how can we do this cheaper? How can we do it bringing other money to it? And the real difference for me has been everybody's talking about deals and money. So it used to be that when you were a creative like myself, you would be allowed by both your own team and by the commissioners you spoke to talk about anything to do with the business. It was seen as like a dirty word and how dare you sort of bring money to the party. And goodness, that was awful. And now I can't imagine a meeting where I didn't know what the tariff was or how I might improve that tariff or how I might be able to undercut it or bring money to it or do something different in business terms.
That's interesting. So actually, we might see in the future commissioning teams getting smaller and everybody having a mix of skill sets rather than it being, oh, we can't talk about money. That's not my department. I'm just going to talk about the creative aspect. Everybody has to be, it sounds like everybody's got to be much more commercially minded, much more entrepreneurial and fleet of foot and willing to do anything they can to make those shows work, right?
I think you talk about commissioning teams. I think if you look at a model like Channel 5, where I think they've got an excellent commissioning team in terms of that, they've got very few commissioners across a lot of hours. You look at a lot of different genres and there's a lack of snobbery about it. There's a real approach of kind of like faith in the commissioners that they can, if they want to do a doc or a fact show or quiz show, whatever they think the best ideas are. It's a very different model from, say, Channel 4, which is quite segmented as to what you're looking at. And it's interesting to see that they've got a lot less commissioners than anyone else and are very, very tight with money, as you know. But they are, I don't know if it will lead to less commissioners. But I think in other organizations, there's definitely too many commissioners. I mean, I know one project right now that's got 5 commissioners on it, which to me is actually beyond insane.
Well, that must be a nightmare. I mean, you talk about brand-funded programming being difficult, having 5 different commissioners on a show. I mean...
Well, it's impossible.
No,
I mean,
exactly.
I know in lockdown at one point, I had 4 commissioners on a show, which was insane. But that's not my project. The one with 5, I don't think I could cope with it. I think I'd have the breakdown, but I think that those kinds of projects, that's telling you've got too many commissioners not doing enough. I mean, that's really what that's telling you straight away. But I think often people who run big organizations don't look as tightly commercially as they can at their own organization because you sort of accept the way things have always been done. And I think the joy of being a true indie and looking across the piece is you can see quite clearly that some people do it differently and it works. And that lovely overview, you get that big picture.
How about catalogue, Kate? I mean, you've got, presumably, you've got, tens, if not hundreds of hours of your own catalogue. I mean, how are you monetizing that at the moment? I mean, obviously it'd be various different stages of licensing that's happening around the world. But I mean, are you looking to take a lot of that and basically reversion it and actually start using the social media channels and different digital networks to generate income from that? Is that something you're thinking about, or is that less important?
No, nothing's less important. I mean, look, when you've got IP, there's something you can do with it. And what are you doing with it? And where is it? And how does it work? It's really interesting to note that, Netflix's re-emergence of, I don't know if you've noticed, but Fat Friends has come back onto Netflix and it's a drama from many years ago. And it's doing incredibly well for them on Netflix. Nothing dies in television. And what's really interesting is when you watch. Children watch television. They can find things that you thought were well gone, like they'll start watching like the original series of Skins, or they'll start watching, and this is happening in unscripted too, so they're watching stuff from a long time ago that you sort of think, oh, why are they watching that? And they're going back to YouTube once the monetizing works well of this. Those old formats, those old programs, that old IP, it doesn't die. Nothing's dying. So it's a bit like your digital thumbprint, whatever it's called, never ever disappears. Well, neither does your kind of like a television history. So in terms of what we're doing as a company is consider, I think it's early days on trying to work out, just because a broadcaster isn't interested anymore in that program you used to make. I mean, if something was decommissioned and it doesn't seem right, I can't think of a show, but say Don't Tell the Bride or something, I don't know if that's on air still. But then how would you approach that as getting it to the public? Because someone's going to want to watch it. We've got one particular quite factual format was unbelievably successful, and it ran for, countless of hours, well into the hundreds, and was very, very popular when it was decommissioned because it didn't suit the channel's desire of what they wanted to do moving forward, which I totally understand, by the way. However, there's an audience who love that program, and therefore there's money in that program. How to get that program to that audience is an interesting question. So, do you put it on a fast channel? Do you try and do a deal with another channel who'll show it? Can you sell the whole back catalogue? Do you set it up yourself? I mean, do you just put it up on YouTube and monetize it for our advertising? I mean, these are the questions which we are thinking about. I think it's complex because going back to what I said earlier, there isn't one solution. There are a range of solutions, and I think it's just keeping your mind open to, if you've got something that's been on there and has been popular in some shape or form, there's something you can do with it. You know, it's worth remembering things like Farmer Wants a Wife, which was a format many years ago on ITV. It didn't really rate very well for ITV. In fact, I think it was pulled off after a very short period of time. However, it's internationally a huge format.
So my final guest on this week's show is Peter, who's a indie owner, again from London, mainly focusing in animation. So that's an interesting area. We've talked about two predominantly factual producers up to this point. Peter, how are you doing? Thank you for joining us.
Yes, no problem. Pleasure to be here.
Brilliant that you're spending time to talk a little bit about how this commissioning downturn is affecting you. So first of all, tell me about, the last 12 months or so. How's that affected your business?
So I think it's definitely gotten tougher for sure. I think it's a very different world to what it was maybe during COVID or before COVID. And so whilst a lot of people during COVID saw a big downturn in work, we saw a big upturn because obviously if people couldn't get into a live action studio to do things, they turned to animation. And so that caused a massive boom in animation production, which was great. And very sadly, that is now over. And so we are now trying to readjust. I think there was a lot of hope that would just continue on post-COVID, and it hasn't. And what we're now seeing is not just that COVID has obviously impacted things and changed the perspectives of a lot of these big streamers and big distribution companies, but we're also seeing that the landscape has changed generally. So, people are turning a lot more to YouTube and to Roblox and things like that, where they can get their content for free. And also people are making it for basically free. It seems crazy that we're an animation studio and we'll put millions of pounds behind a series and then we'll get less views than a kid with a 20 quid webcam in his bedroom who can just make something really funny and engaging, and that will outperform any kind of TV show, and yet that is the landscape we're working in. So we're trying to navigate that and figure out how do we make engaging content without blowing a budget, and focusing on what's engaging rather than necessarily the absolute top-tier best quality stuff.
That's really interesting. And so just so I understand, your main clients during that boom time, were they the streamers or were they terrestrial broadcasters or international broadcasters?
It was a complete mix. There was genuinely just a bit of everything, which was great. But yeah, primarily our stuff has normally come from terrestrial streamers.
Okay, and did you outsource a lot of that production to other territories? Because traditionally, animation has been based. India has been a big supplier to the animation industry, and other territories. Or is that how you operated? You built the IP in the UK, and actually a lot of the physical work that goes into producing animation was happening offshore.
That does happen quite a lot in this industry, but not with us. We're a company that doesn't do that. We do it all. Not all in the UK, but it's all based under our company name. Obviously, yeah, we've covered it. It opened up the doors to more remote working. So we were able to work with people in other countries, and we still carry that on now, which has been really beneficial. But we don't outsource the work in the same way that a lot of animation companies do, where they have either a company in India,
or they work with an agency or a company in India or some country like that. Whereas no, we work all in-house, as it were.
Okay. And so you've seen a massive downturn in commissions. I mean, and as you know, it's a really interesting story you're talking about, user-generated content for kids as well. YouTube Kids has been a massive success. I mean, looking forward, do you expect to see the levels of commissioning from your traditional clients increasing up to a previous levels, not necessarily COVID, because we know that was a boom. Are you expecting that to come back in any way, or is now the time that it's a crunch time for your business and you're actually looking at changing your business model completely in terms of how you create content and who you create it for, and where your distribution channels are?
Yeah, I think that is completely dependent on the broadcasters, on the distributors. It depends if they want to stick with the same model that they're using. I think they're very aware. I've gone to many panel talks and seen many articles about their model, and they're aware that they're not getting the numbers they used to, and they can't put in the budgets they used to. So I think they need to figure out how they want to readjust to this new marketplace. I think the commissions will go back up, but it won't be in the same way that we have seen it before, how it was, just like a standard TV show. I think it's going to be a much more mixed format, mixed media. I think some broadcasters will get on board with that, some may not, and it will be a very different landscape for sure. I think if they don't adapt, then it will be difficult for them to keep up. But at the same time, I think we're adapting in that way where we're trying to become less dependent on them for work, and we're trying to make our own work as well, so that we can work in the same way as, the UGC creators, and making stuff, that doesn't require a broadcaster. And then working that digital first perspective where, like a Cokeman or something like that, where it can then go onto a linear platform later down the line.
Yeah, it can almost be the last consideration. I mean, there's opportunities. We've seen how kids animation brands have done incredible business all around the world, thinking of Bluey and so many different Peppa Pig, so many different other examples, but taking that into the live area as well. Merchandising, obviously huge licensing in the kids area. So that's interesting. So how are you doing then? How's it going with are you just taking baby steps when it comes to launching your own brands on YouTube and other platforms?
Yeah, so we're not going as fast as I would like us to, but I'm sure I'm less on the budget side and more on the creative side. And so I've got a million ideas that I think would all be brilliant and we should do all of them straight away. But I think it's a very, very risky scenario to put your own money into a project that may or may not make money. And the biggest thing we found is that discoverability on YouTube is very hard, and you can make something really good and you can even do all the SEO and the keywords and all this sort of stuff, and it still doesn't necessarily do well. There's no 100% guarantee formula for something doing well, and so we just kind of put our best foot forwards. And I think one of the things that we found is you've got to keep going even when it's not necessarily doing well, because like a lot of these brands did not become a success in 6 months, There's so many of these kids' brands on YouTube that have been going for years and years and years, and they weren't necessarily big hits at the time, but they are now. And so it's just a case of sticking with it.
Yeah. Well, that's it. It's the fact is, putting it on YouTube, it's discoverable, isn't it? I mean, that's the first step, and you don't know how that's going to get picked up in. It might resonate with different cultures. It might resonate in different parts of the world much more than it necessarily does to begin with in your home territories. So, how about artificial intelligence then? When it comes to animation, surely that is going to revolutionize how you produce content and maybe give you an opportunity to try and produce more content much cheaper. Is that an option for you?
It is. It's something that we're keeping our eye out on, and we're looking into it, but it is something that we're taking a lot of notable considerations to the moral and ethical aspects of it in terms of how it takes people's work and reuses it. We definitely don't want to come to a point where we have ever taken work from someone else that, wasn't properly authorized. And so we're open to it, but it needs to be in the right way. I think one of the biggest considerations we've had with AI is that with a lot of these videos and products and images and stuff that's coming out is a lack of consistency. So you can ask for a character from, Mid-Journey or DALL-E or wherever it might be, and it will generate that character. But then if you ask for that character in another pose, it creates a whole new character from scratch. And so we're trying to figure out if it is plausible. I think the biggest thing is I think people who can use AI will be very valuable, but I don't think AI will completely take out jobs in the way. I think a lot of people are worried. I think it will just enhance people's jobs and help them do more. I think the other aspect of it is when you send stuff to clients, they will often say, "Oh, this is great, but could you change this one tiny thing?" And if you don't have layered files, you can't do that a lot of the time, and often ChatGPT or also DALL-E or Mid-Journey or whatever it is can't make those sorts of changes because they're too specific and that's not within its pro. I find that it works on a very broad scale picture and it's not at the point yet where it's very detail oriented. And so maybe down the line, maybe that will change, but right now I think we're still very much focused on just on human-based content. But at the same time, I'm sure, there's lots of AI content coming out which is competing with us. And so that's why we haven't written it off altogether, but we're not actively progressing it. I think we're keeping an eye out. We're seeing what other people are doing because we don't want to be left behind, but we don't see it as a replacement for what we do right now.
Right. Okay. And so when it comes to you as a business, where you are right now, and looking ahead to the next 12 months or so, are you confident? How's your outlook at the moment? How are you feeling about the next 12 months?
I'm nervous but optimistic. I think it's the key thing. I think there's lots of great ideas out there, and if we can execute them on a budget that is workable and less risky, then that works for us. I think we are starting to get our ducks in a row and getting our heads around this digital space. I think digital has been written off for many years as a bit of a joke and a bit of a side thought and not really being taken seriously. I think it's been taken seriously for things like marketing, but not for the place to actually launch new brands. And now that is starting to fade. And so as people start to take this more seriously, we're able to move into that space more aggressively, and hopefully we'll be able to do that and do more. We've been able to keep a decent amount of work, which is great. So I think keeping that work is great. And then the next step is, okay, we've got that. How do we then actively progress it into a point where it is making a lot of money and keeping us afloat? So that will be the next step in terms of just making sure we get to those stages earlier than we have in the past. It's taken us a long time to actually get a YouTube channel or whatever it is sorted. And now we're much more proactive rather than reactive in that situation.
All right. Well, Peter, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great to hear you sharing, your challenges, and it's a massively changing landscape, isn't it, right now? And shifting sands feels like the term. But I wish you all the best for the next 12 months, and fingers crossed for you. And I'm sure we'll be seeing you in 25 and 26 and beyond.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Well, that's about it for this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks very much to all the indies who contributed to this show anonymously. TellyCast was produced by Spirit Studios and recorded in London. For more videos featuring movers and shakers of the TV and digital content industries, don't forget to subscribe to TellyCast. Just search TellyCast TV on YouTube or hit the link below. Next week, following the tragic death of producer John Bolson, we look into the issues of duty of care in the TV industry. Until then, stay safe.